Well, good afternoon. How do you like our new intro video? Very cool. We just had that done. So today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Today we're going to talk about emergency situations, hurricane preparedness, and that's any situation that you're in where you have the reef tank running and the electric could go out. You could lose power for days, weeks, even months on end. I lived in Florida since 1971. I've lived through five major hurricanes, 2 of them with reef tanks. So I understand what it's like to go through a hurricane and go through a major crisis, lose power for days and weeks on end, and have to keep your fish and your corals alive. The first thing you want to do is be prepared. Have everything ready, have it in your house, ready to go. Don't wait till the last minute. So we're going to talk a little bit about really 2 stages. 1, having backup power and the power consumption of your aquarium. And 2, what chemicals and additives to have on hand to use in an emergency. Some stuff we would never use normally, but in an emergency, it's nice to have it on hand and you want it in your emergency box before that hurricane hits. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So first, let's get into the power consumption of our aquarium and of our reef tank. Power consumption is really something that's very important before we go out and we buy a backup power supply or a generator. Now, all of our appliances, most of them I should say, run off of a transformer. It takes AC, it transforms it into DC, and then the DC voltage feeds our lights and our pumps, generally 24 and 12 volt systems. So let's take a look at one of the transformers that come with my lights. And those are the ones that I'm going to show you. And then I'm going to show you how I broke my tank, the tank that's behind you right here, that 150 gallon, that's about 125 gallon reef tank, how I broke it down to figure its power consumption. So when we look at our second display here, and we go in, let me zoom in here. This is the power supply for my LED lights. You see that this power output is 48 volts at 3.9 amps. I want to know what that wattage is, because that's what most generators and backup power supplies are rated at. They're watts per hour. So this tells me right on the power supply here that its rated power is 187.2 watts. Now let's say that I didn't have that information. Well, let me clear this out. We're going to use Ohm's law. Now Ohm's law tells us that if we multiply the voltage times the amperage, that'll give us the wattage. So let's do that. 48 volts times 3.9 amps equals 187.2 watts. 187.2 watts, perfect. So we have the tools we need to figure out what the wattage, what the power consumption is ourselves. We're going to use Ohm's law. So I did that with my tank behind me, and I took all the devices, appliances that I have plugged into power, and I added up the wattage, and we're going to do it together so you can see how to do it with your tank. It's very easy. Worst thing you could do with anything is complicated. Let me get myself out of our way. Here we are. Okay, so our backup power supply and generator requirements, we're going to do the math. We're going to use Ohm's law to figure how many watts, so that's amps times volts. I have two 52 watt LED lamps. They use 1 amp power supply at 24 volts each. So its consumption could be as high as 24 watts. So I have 2 for my lights. That adds up to 48 watts of power. I'm going to figure the maximum power no matter what the lights are set at, because that's the maximum power that that transformer can produce. So we're going to figure maximums here, so we're well covered. I have 3 pumps. I have 1 sump and 2 wave makers. I use a single 6 amp 12 volt power supply for them. So we're going to do that math. Amps times volts. 6 amps times 12 volts, 72 watts of power for my pumps. I have an auto doser. It's a 12 volt at 1 amp. 12 at 1 amp is 12 watts. Very simple. I have a skimmer rated at 12 volts at 2 amps. 12 volts times 2 amps, 24 watts. See how easy that is? Now we come to the chiller. That's the big one. Now, we're going to talk about chillers, because if you don't have a water chiller on your reef tank and you live in any of the states that get above 90 degrees, you're spending way too much money on air conditioning and fans and all that other stuff and controlling pH. And get a chiller. Keep your water at 77 degrees. Everything stabilizes. It's amazing. It's almost like your salinity finally stabilizing. Get a chiller. You can find a link down there for a great deal, like $200. That'll chill a 100-gallon tank. Now, let's get back to the amperage or wattage. We have a biggie here. This is our chiller, 115 volts at 20 amps, but that is not how you rate refrigerators and heaters. There's other math involved. We're not going to get into it because on all refrigerators and heaters, they tell you exactly what their consumption wattage is. On this one, it's 300 watts. Now, when it runs, it only runs 5 times an hour during the day when it's hot and only 3 times an hour at night when it's hot. So it doesn't really use a continuous 300 watts. However, I have to be ready for that 300 watt load when that chiller comes on top of everything else that's running off of the backup power or off of the generator. So we're going to accommodate for all of that. So let's add up our power down here below. Our total power supply demand, 48 watts for the lights, 72 watts for the pumps, 12 watts for the auto doser, 24 watts for our protein skimmer, equals a total of 156 watts of power. We're going to round that up to 200 watts to be safe. Nice safe gap there. We always do that. Plus our water chiller we know is 300 watts, so we have a grand total of 500 watt hours of backup power needed. Whew. It was very easy to do, wasn't it? Once you sit down and write it all down. Very easy to do. We know that most generators and backup power supplies started about 500 watts. Generators started about 1200 watts. So most backup power supplies are going to be good for me. A UPS will run my whole aquarium for about an hour. It'll give me time to get a generator going. If I want to get a solar backup, it'll last even longer. And so this is pretty neat. We're going to look at some of those, and then we're going to talk about some chemical options to have on hand in case of an emergency that we have to dose. So let's go ahead and bring this up. This is my website, and in our website here at FishyFins.com, we have an area we just added called Emergency Reef Items. And this is everything you're going to need to get through a hurricane situation. So when you come in, and let me get myself out of the way again, I'm always in the way. When you come in here, the chiller. Folks, for $200, an R134A refrigerant chiller that'll cool down a 100-gallon tank in Florida, it's a steal. Click on it, support us too. We do get rewards from them when you buy something from them, and that's how we pay for all this. So click on it. It is well worth it. I can't believe I went with that one for so long. 10,000 watt generator. These are whole house generators, big boys. Good to have. It's only under $1,000 at Amazon. Great link down here. Choose that. Here's that buzz box we're talking about. For a lousy $150, you can get a small 1,200 watt generator. It'll run your tank for probably 6 to 10 hours. So what better contingency can you have than a $150 buzz box generator that does the trick? Come down here to these solar power units. You don't need gasoline or propane. This one will sit outside your house. The top of it, this opens up into a solar panel, and it charges and feeds your equipment on your tank while the sun's up. It recharges itself during the day and it runs through the night. So it will run easily. This one for $225 will easily run my aquarium half the day, all night long, and then recharge itself the next day and be ready to go. So these are awesome right now, way better than they used to be. So if you're looking for that option, maybe you have an apartment, you can't run a generator. Here's a great option if you're in a condominium or something and you're limited. This UPS, I said that earlier with my tank, this simple UPS backup for $50 keeps my tank back here going for about an hour and a half. Maybe 2 hours if I don't have my pumps running high and have my lights down low. So that gives me time to get out, get the generator ready, get gas in it, make sure it starts up. I may have to go to the store and get a spark plug. I may have to get gasoline. This gives me some time in an emergency to keep a cool head and get things together. Of course, don't forget your power cords you're going to need. A great link for them down there. Emergency dosing additives. Great stuff here. Phosphon. I use this in my tank back here all the time to control phosphorus, so I always have it in my reactor. No issues there. Zeolite. I keep this for hurricanes. This is my emergency zeolite. Zeolite really removes toxins and heavy metals. And I have this because if your water sets in an emergency, everything bad happens during an emergency. Magnets crack, filters leak, stuff drops into the tank, right? Drywall, nails, screws, crazy stuff. The kid throws food in there. Zeolite takes all of those impurities out. Wonderful stuff. Good to keep around. One thing that I do have and I keep is the reef buffer. Now, most people will tell you this is poison. It is. It's terrible for a tank in normal situations. But in an emergency, it's a blessing. If a big chunk of drywall falls into your tank, a screw falls in there, food goes in there, something dies and an enemy dies because the power's coming on and off. It gets sucked up into one of your wave pumps. This stuff is going to keep everything stable for a week or two until you could get your head right, the power comes back on, you could get to the store and get what you need, do water changes. This is just for an emergency, and if you don't have it when you need it, you'll wish you did. So, normal, I don't use it. Emergency, I use it. Let's go down and take a look at these two, Safe and Prime. Safe and Prime, I use both of these, Safe and Prime. Safe is actually, they do the same thing, but Safe is a powder, it's more concentrated, 1/4 of a teaspoon to 5 gallons, treats, tap water. Prime is a liquid, it's not quite as strong, it doesn't last as long, and it removes ammonia nitrates. Both of them have probiotics in it for nitrifying bacteria, so both very good to have. You could add Safe right into the tank if something bad happens, just to kill all the ammonia nitrates, nitrites, chlorine, everything. It's safe. So it's a good emergency backup. You can mix it with a little tank water, pour it right in, it's fine. Prime the same way, you could dump it right into the tank, it's fine. So good to have in case of an emergency. Let's talk about food. Food's very important. In case of an emergency, you don't want to put any food in there that's going to be high in nitrates or phosphates. You don't want frozen food or refrigerated food, so it's good to have. I love this stuff, Ocean Nutrition. I'm going to tell you something. My fish love it, my crabs love it, the shrimp love it, the corals eat it, the anemones eat it, everything, they love it. So this is good to have, the dry flake food. It doesn't put a load on your tank, and during an emergency, wonderful. The zooplankton and the phytoplankton, the liquid from Seachem, is wonderful. It doesn't have to be refrigerated, and it will feed your corals for weeks and months on end. If you don't have power, or if you're very nervous about skunking out your tank, if your pumps aren't running, the power's coming on and off, bad things are happening in an emergency. So using these foods, wonderful way just to kind of get by when you need to get by. So again, and if you would, visit our partners down there, Corals Anonymous and Unique Corals. Corals Anonymous has just about everything you could imagine. So whatever you're looking for to stock a new tank, or if you want some unique pieces for your tank, go to Unique Corals. If you want more expensive stuff, you're looking for high-end corals, those really nice euphyllias, those really nice hammers, the chalice corals. You can get all that at Corals Anonymous also. But Unique Corals, most of their stuff is raised. They have their own brand, and they also sell a whole line of other stuff too. So support our partners. Click down there, check out what they have, enjoy it. We sure appreciate everybody tuning into this. Let me turn that second display off, and let's see, I'll bring our storm picture up. And so, just a heads up, if you live in Florida, you live in the Gulf Coast states, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, all the way around there, the truth of the matter is you're dealing with power outages. If you're up in Appalachia, heading on up, and you're in the tornado alley in Oklahoma, I don't care where you are. California with the fires, they're getting their share of hurricanes too now. New Jersey's getting their share of hurricanes. You have to be ready. So, having something ready to go, having the generator ready, having the backup power supply ready, having the food you need in place and ready is very important. You shouldn't ever wait till the very last minute to have anything done. So, we're going to leave this with, of course, our little hurricane running, so you can see that to remind you that don't wait until the last minute. Get that water chillers. I'm doing a whole video about water chillers, pH, and the stability of good salinity and good temperature. 2 parameters that people don't spend enough time focusing on that send all the other parameters into a tailspin. If your temperature is going up and down 3 or 4 degrees, 5 degrees, and your salinity is, you're nowhere at all. So we're going to talk about that in the next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll turn our storm off. We're going to go ahead and put our intro back on. And I thank you all. Have a most wonderful day, and we will see you in your reef tanks. Bye-bye now.